But it's a pleasure to introduce Bob Keller, who has been the longest running advisor for the REU. We've been running our REU since a long time, 2005 I think, and every year we've had an Improvisor, an intelligent music software project, and thank you, Bob, for coming and sharing a little bit about what's happened and going to happen with that.
Cool. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm taking the video not because I'm narcissistic, but we just have a new release with some new stuff in it. I'm trying to show our users what's going on there, so it's easier to actually show than to explain in words. We call our project Intelligent Music Software, and I'd like to start off by acknowledging a number of the contributors that have contributed over the years. So we've actually been running since, started in 2005, with much more modest goals than we are able to entertain today. And we've also had a lot of people from off campus, mostly courtesy of the REU. So these are all people that have contributed in some way since the start of the project. And it's appropriate that I acknowledge them because a lot of their code and blood is in the product that we're going to see here. So when we say intelligent music software, I'm not trying to suggest that we've achieved strong AI. I'm not even sure I believe in strong AI. But it certainly sounds better than dumb music software. So that's one of the reasons we call the project intelligent. But to justify a little bit the terminology, the Webster Online Dictionary says that intelligence has to do with the ability to learn, understand, deal with new situations, and those are things that we're trying to build into the software that we're developing. So why music? We all, hopefully everybody likes music. There's a lot of reasons that computer scientists should be interested in music. One is for our own entertainment, our pleasure. It's also educational. Outside of the realm of music, it's challenging to try to understand what's going on. There's an area called music therapy. So music has a therapeutic value, and we can also treat it as an object of study in its own right. From the mathematical point of view, scientific, psychological, psychoacoustics, all these different ways that we can relate to music. So it is a very active area of research these days. And one of the things that I kind of keep in mind, now we haven't really achieved it yet, is what I would call an improvising companion, which was actually in a goal for one of our early collaborators, Professor Tom, had this in mind, that she would like to have a software product that was able to interact with the musician. And so you, rather than having to enlist friends and neighbors to improvise or play with you, you could actually use software to do it. So that really was not in our objective originally, but it is more and more coming to the fore as we introduce more sophistication into the tool. So an ideal improvising companion would be one that can play the background from chord notation. You write out the chords of the song and it can play a background in some kind of appropriate style. It listens to what the user says or plays, sometimes over the background, sometimes not. And in the course of that listening, it can learn the style and the motifs and so on that the players are playing in such a way that it can actually interact with them and play things back similar to those. And also it can create melodies of its own that are similar to the ones learned, or could be simpler or more complex depending on what your objective is. So for example, if you want a teacher who's challenging you all the time, you want something that's playing back something more complex than what you just played. But if you want something that is, oh, this what I just played was not so great, how could I simplify that to get a better understanding? You might want to simplify it, or just do something different in some interesting way. So just to emphasize the currency of the topic, this is the most recent issue of the Computer Communications of the ACM, some of which are members, and it has an article on robotic musicianship, as they call it. Most of the focus is on the actual physical characteristics of robots that would play, rather than what you might call the intellectual or knowledge-based characteristics, which in my view is actually the hard part. Although when you think about creating a robot hand that can articulate in the same way that a pianist does, that's a pretty challenging problem too. So I don't want to minimize the efforts there, but it's worth taking a look at this. Actually, the online version has a lot more pictures, so you might check that out. So in working in this area, we work with two major, what I'll call sonic universes of sound. One is the audio, which is what we all hear when we listen to music, and the other is symbolic, which is what the computer is better at processing. And the reason it's better at processing is that symbolic form discretizes what we're hearing or what we want to be able to play in a way that audio itself does not. So there's a gap there between audio and symbolic. So if I take this instrument here, which is a digital piano, we hear audio from it, but actually internally there's a symbolic form in the form of when the keys are pressed, those are converted into what are called MIDI signals. And then an internal computer processes those MIDI signals to produce the sound. So there's actually, the gap is being closed there, going from symbolic to audio. And there are lots of other instruments that do emit symbols. So there's a wind instrument that's like a recorder, or a soprano saxophone, there's guitars, violins, and so on, plus electronic music instruments like the tenorion. So there is a lot of stuff out there that doesn't really use audio, although it would certainly be nice to use audio as well in what we do. Crossing those sonic universes, going from symbolic to audio, is a relatively easy process. I'm saying relatively easy because going the other way, going from audio to symbolic, is really hard, especially if you have polyphonic music, multiple voices being played at the same time. Trying to convert that into some symbolic form is a pretty challenging task, and there are no really perfect tools for doing that right now. An example of a kind of offline tool is called Transcribe, and what it does is it can take a recording such as a CD, and you can slow it down and step through essentially the Fourier spectrum at each instant of time, and infer what notes are being played or what notes are being played from that spectrum, and then use that to transcribe by hand into music notation. So that's really nice, but it's not a really very effective tool for real-time composition. Other people have looked at tools such as Smart Music, which was actually developed by Professor Dannenberg, actually a trumpet-playing professor, so I can relate to that. And he sold out to make a company which is now used to train school kids and I guess other people. What it does is it tracks from the music that you play, and then it shows you on the score what notes you played wrong or what notes you were too late or too early on. So it's kind of interesting approach. And another tool in this space is called GenJam, which is another trumpet playing professor, and it does actually improvise solos with him. So he actually goes out and does performances with what he calls his virtual quintet. So he's the only human player, and then the rest of the quintet is all in a box that's sitting on a table. And you can check this video out. So it's proprietary now. He does say it's going to be open source once he gets to a certain point. I'm not sure when that is, or if there is reached yet. But it is very interesting and it's inspiring. And we are sort of want to do things like that, except that our focus is more on an educational tool. So we want to see the notation and be able to change it and things like that, rather than just perform. So our work has been mostly captured in software called Impro-Visor, Improvisation Advisor, and it includes musical information. As much as we can, we try to codify that information in a kind of user-modifiable form. So we have vocabulary that defines certain chords, what chords are, what scales go along with the chords. We have lead sheets which specify the melody with the chords so that you can understand what it is you're trying to play over. And then styles, different kinds of styles, and grammars which are used to improvise with the tool. So I'm going to show you some of those things in just a moment. A few words about the grammars. So these are, for those of you who know grammars, these are probabilistic context-free grammars. And most of the time in computer science, we use a grammar to analyze things. Like we have a programming language, we want to use the grammar to structure a compiler or an interpreter to convert the language into some other language, such as machine language. But in our case, we actually go the other direction. We actually want to use the grammar to generate stuff. So we want to generate music from the grammar. And because in improvisation we want to have nuance when we have it play, we want that generation to be probabilistic. So we don't want to hear the same thing every time we play. So Improvisor uses grammars generically. Another more recent development that we'll actually exploit in a moment is called a transformational grammar. And in that model, what we do is not just generate, but we actually take input that's music in symbolic form and convert it to some other music in symbolic form. So we can make it more embellished, more elaborate, more interesting in some sense. So that's also a capability that we have. The kind of techniques that we use with these grammars is one of them is to use what we call abstract melody. So abstract melody is like you have categories of notes, but you don't have the actual notes. You have this note is a chord tone or it's a color tone, the note that goes with the chord but isn't actually in the chord. And then you have durations of the notes. And with a given abstract melody, you can produce lots of other real melodies. So taking an abstract melody as a framework that is generated by the grammar, then you can convert that into lots of other real melodies. And that's one way of achieving nuance when the software improvises with you. And this is what a grammar, this is a synthetic grammar that is written by a human. Basically, this entire grammar, I actually play something in a moment with using a grammar very, very similar to this one, so you can get an idea of what complexity is involved. There's not too many rules in this case. Contrast with a grammar that's learned from a human playing a solo, the grammars tend to be a lot bigger, so in some cases thousands of rules. And one of the challenging tasks of working with this kind of software is to be able to process those grammars in real time so that they actually generate solos without appreciable delay when you're playing. So in this case, we have a transcription of a solo from a famous soloist, and that's converted into a textual transcription, and then from that we learn the grammar, and then we're able to use the grammar over any tune, not just the tune that from which it was learned originally. Another kind of AI-ish component of our work is analyzing the chord progression of the tune. So from a raw chord progression, what we'd like to be able to do is sort of chunk the chord progression rather than thinking of each chord individually. We're thinking of chords as a group and saying, well, that particular grouping of chords forms what we call a brick, which is like a cadence or some other kind of a musical harmonic figure, to understand better what the tune is and to guide the improviser in learning how to play over that tune. So I'll show you an example of that when I do the demonstration. And then we can also use those bricks as a basis for learning grammars, and we actually have that now. So there are several different ways to learn grammars, and one of them is to use the concept of a brick and capture the melody that's being played over that brick and abstract it into the form of an abstract melody for later use in the grammar. A sort of a side approach, which is what I'm hoping to revisit this summer, is what we call a deep learning approach. And we built a simple tool for that a few years back, and we called it RBM Improvisor. RBM stands for Restricted Boltzmann Machine. And that is a component of what are called deep belief networks. So you have a stack of these restricted Boltzmann machines. And the idea is that as you progress up the stack from the input layer on up, the higher up you go, the more abstract the concepts are that are learned by the network. But the attractive feature of this particular type of network is it is probabilistic, so it still has the chance of giving us some nuance with the kinds of melodies that are generated given a chord progression. So that's not actually an improviser yet, but it may make its way there before we're done. So I'm going to give you a demo with a few of the more recent things that we have done. I'll start with trading, then I'll show you what we call passive trading, active trading, and so forth. It just happens that I have an instance of the software here, and so what we're going to do, stretch this out a bit to make it a little bit more visible. First, I will play the melody with the chord background. So the letter symbols over the staves, like CM7, F7, those are chord symbols. And the software has to convert those into an actual accompaniment in the form of bass, piano and drum. So we can hear what that sounds like with the melody we played. This may be a familiar melody. It's been around for a long time. It's a jazz standard. So it's Autumn Leaves. Now what the job of the improviser is take that melody away. So you just have the chords now. And how does that sound? Turn the volume up a little bit. All the way up. So this piano is synthesizing the bass drums and the piano sounds itself. You could also do this without such a piano by just doing it on the computer, but the sounds are actually better in the piano. That's what I like to use that for demonstration. Okay, so that's what the improviser hears when he or she is playing on this tune, and then it's up to him or her to make up a melody that kind of fits with the tune. The software actually will kind of give back feedback visually. If your melody is not really consistent with the harmony, it's so-called outside the harmony, then you'll see notes showing up as red on the staff as they're played. If it's consistent with the harmony, then most notes will be black or green. I'm sorry for colorblind people. I have a little bit of myself, so there's not much I can do about that. And then there's also blue, which is a jazz, what we call approach tone in jazz. So I'll do a little improvisation here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to record what I'm playing as we go. So I think I'll give myself the benefit of a count-in here just to get psyched up for it. That it does show up some notes that are red, meaning those notes are really outside of harmony. And then once we've captured that, we can play it back and enjoy what it was that we had just done. Because this has MIDI input, you could use any MIDI input, including if you don't have a keyboard like this that actually has a synthesizer in it handy, you could just use a cheapo keyboard and use that to enter your notes. Or you can use point and click, things like that. There's other ways to enter stuff, but this would capture it in real time just as well as that would, and it's a lot more compact. So now let me give you the idea of trading, which is a term that is used by jazz musicians to indicate that we want to have one soloist play some amount of music, like 4 bars, and then another one plays. Usually that's done in companionship with a drummer, trading back and forth with the drummer, but you can also do it with melodic instruments instead of, not that a drum isn't a melodic instrument, but it is, but you know what I mean. So I'm going to take this away, what we just did there, and I'm going to go into, first of all, what we call passive trading mode, which is a mode that we've had in Improvisor for a few years now. And so passive trading gives the user space to trade, but it's not really listening to what he or she is playing. It's just doing its thing. And so it's going to be improvising, and we're going to react to the improvisation. Maybe one of the things we might try to do is kind of follow what it's doing in some fashion. So it's already playing its solo up. nice for practice. You will get tired before it does. That's kind of nice. You go on forever. And, but it's not really reacting in any intelligent way to what you're doing. And so contrast that to active trading, which is our most recent thing that kind of is really working here. I'm going to set some parameters here now to, okay, so in active trading, it can go first, or the musician can go first. I'm going to go first this time and have it react to me. And what the way it's going to react in this particular setting is it's going to use a transformational grammar. So it's going to take what I play, which is going to be a relatively simplistic melody, and it's going to embellish it in some way using the grammatical aspects of the transformational grammar. Without that, the eighth notes come out equal. They don't sound right. We can then play back what we played and enjoy or not. So you see, this is the line I played, and you notice that its line is a little more complex. This is its line. And we have different modes of that. One is where it just copies exactly what you play to its best of its ability, and you can see that. Or so without any embellishment, there's other different things, and that's an area of active research to make that response kind of more convincing, more like a real musician. So one other thing I want to show you is, supposing we don't have any of these MIDI instruments available to us, we just have, let's say, our trumpet. Just happen to have one here. We have our trumpet, and we want to interact with the software, okay? So for that end, we have developed a tool called Pitch Tracker, and what it does is tries to convert the audio, monophonic audio, into MIDI so that the software can react to it. And I have to do some settings here in order to make this effective. Change the input to the IAC bus, as it's called. Okay. So now we're going to, again, do active improvisation. So it'll react to what I play, hopefully to what I play on the trumpet. Here goes nothing. If I wanted to listen to what I just did, or if I had a homework assignment for Music 84, which is the class I teach in improvisation, I could take that and tweak it for the, I take all the mistakes out. You can also check to see, are there any mistakes? So did I make any mistakes? Are there any red notes? And I did pretty well that time. Yeah, so not every red note is actually a mistake, but but it probably was. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you, and be happy to take any questions.
All right, let's give Bob a round of applause. And are there any questions? Thoughts? I have one. Ron, why don't you start?
Well, I think I may have asked this question before, so maybe involved, but the probabilities in the grammar.
Yes.
I'm wondering about how those are chosen and whether they are dynamics. I guess maybe I'll put those two questions.
Okay, so right now they're built into the grammar. In principle, this would not be tremendously hard to do. You could actually vary them with a slider or something like that in real time. But right now they're not. So if you hand construct the grammar, which is that grammar that I showed, and by the way, when I was trading passively, the grammar was being used to create those melodies was very similar to the one that I showed. So one page worth of stuff. But you can do them by hand, so you can adjust the probabilities to make it more or less complex by, if you want, say, lots of 16th notes, then you make the 16th note part high probability and make it low if you want it simpler. For the learning, though, we actually take that off of the solos. We can give it a corpus of solos, and it will learn the probabilities. So it's all completely automated. So there's no intervention.
Thank you.
And my
Yeah.
follow-up is actually related to that.
Yeah.
One thing I noted in just the demonstrations you gave, which were really nice, is that the improviser, the machine, seems to really like triplets or thirds in a way that humans may not, or to an extent that humans, it seems like
Yeah.
that.
So sort of explanation on that. First of all, the grammar likes triplets, so that's why it likes triplets. But
Okay.
I have it set so it quantizes my input to eighth notes. So you're actually not seeing any triplets from me.
I
Even
see.
if I played them, it wouldn't. And there's actually a lurking problem there, a challenging problem, which is when a musician is playing what we call the swing feel, which is the eighth notes are not played equally. They are essentially like two notes of a triplet tied to one note of triplet. So you have to figure out how to disambiguate that. Is it a triplet or is it a swing? And that is actually an interesting challenge task that we have on the table for doing a better job of transcribing things that might include finer resolution than just eighth notes. So we can actually go up to 6, 12, 24 subdivisions per beat, but once you get to those high resolutions, it's going to capture all the little human fluctuations, and so the end result is the music looks kind of bad. We actually have a quantization feature which will then re-quantize it back to some desired resolution level, but then of course you lose some of the nuance when you do that. But it's a, the ergonomics of transcription is a challenging problem in its own right.
That's interesting. It sounds like those triplets might be some of the swing eighths.
Yes.
Any other thoughts? Let me just say in conclusion that having seen Improvisor grow from 2005, in the very first year of the REU, many years ago, to now, the transformation is pretty amazing. You have to feel that more than anyone.
Yeah, we're on version 8 now, so that gives you an idea. Every version represents something new.
Yeah.
And so we should have at least one student question before we go.
All right, you've been tasked.
Somebody in my group should ask a question.
Okay.
No pressure.
So, right now it's playing mostly chord tones because you were playing mostly chord tones.
Uh-huh.
What happens if you play garbage into it?
So actually, it will what we call rectify. It will, if I play garbage, it will still play things that are not garbage. And actually, so garbage is a little bit overstatement because a really professional musician like Woody Shaw on trumpet, they can play outside the scale and make it sound really good. And that's one of the most advanced things you can do in jazz is be able to play outside and then bring it back in an artistic way. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's really bad just because it's red, but for beginners, usually that's the case. And in my class, we review each other's solos. So I have one person who's been in class here. He can tell you about it. We look at each other's solos and we say, oh, there's a red note. What did you mean by that? Was that an artistic statement, or what was it going on there? And so, oh, I didn't know that red meant something. Other questions? Yeah.
Because when we use the software in this either spring or fall, it took a while to load the active training. Like, how did you guys speed up the process of? Because when you showed us active training, it took a while for it to load, and now it doesn't take any time at all.
Just code.
Just curious.
Yeah.
So what would you say the next steps are? Like what are you planning to get done this summer?
Yeah, so I mentioned that deep learning part, and that's what I'd like to do is, we actually have a bunch of other improvisation methods that I don't have time to show you. We have something based on fractals, we have something based on Markov chains, probability, just pure Markov chains, things like that. But the deep learning approach, to me, in the long run, seems like it's going to be the best thing to achieve this kind of ideal, which is you start playing and it listens to you, and then it can eventually play like you. I think if you read or view some of the videos on deep learning, that is pretty inspiring. So if we could get like 1/10 of the way to something like that and actually put it in Improvisor, that would be a wonderful achievement if we could get that far. But no promises. I'm not holding that out for people won't get paid unless they. All right.
All right, let's give
Thank you very much.
Bob Keller another round of applause.
Try it out. Come on down.
Sure, try it out. And even though we can't reimburse you today, still go out to lunch in CS groups if you'd like. And we have lots of bagels.
Well, I'm not going to say keyboard, but I just want to say it's really amazing.